Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this board of webinar conducted by Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting. And today we have very excellent session on whistleblower. And today we have with us Sri Rajendra Kumar from Southern Region, Central Council member, and who happens to be immediate past chairman of Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting. So, who has done marvelous work under during last year under his leadership. So, first at the outset, let me welcome him and request him to share his words of wisdom, what he is doing under current chairmanship of career counseling. So, I request Rajendra Kumarji, RK Bhai, to share his thoughts. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Preeti Ben, and to all the other esteemed panelists seated here, and the Secretary Aarti Bansal, with whom I had the pleasure of working last year, and all the team of the Board of Internal Audit, the participants who have come here today. In fact, this is the ritual in the Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting. Every Wednesday, we have these type of events which actually motivate our participants, our members to take up internal audit from its right perspective. As our slogan is always there, that internal audit is sunrise area. It is the first point of check for any entity. And as internal auditors, we bring the concept of trust, we bring the concept of confidence. We as chartered accountants place reliance on the work of internal auditors. And as you know, there is also a standard to speak about placing the trust, placing our confidence on the work of internal auditors. The concept of whistleblower, which has been there for some time, it is there officially, but in the past and also if we go to the medieval ages, it was always there. So this particular topic is very interesting today, and I sincerely thank the faculty who has joined us, and Prakash Sharmaji and Preeti Tavla, who are basically the chairman and vice chairman of this committee. They're taking forward and building on the initiatives that waited it. So thank you very much, and the best wishes to the staff also, with Aarti Bansal and all of them in the committee there. With Preeti, in fact, it has been a wonderful experience in the Board of Discipline of ICAI. And as the presiding officer, I must tell you that she has really worked wonders, and a person who has 100% track record, let me put it like that, and a person who is always available for the purposes of the institute in general and her own committees in particular. A passion she has for continuously organizing programs and ensuring that how many of our members come, program must go on. As they say, the show must go on. It goes on. Best wishes to all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, and today we have very important topic, as RK Bhai has said. Thank you very much, RK Bhai, for your deliberations and taking it further now. As rightly said by him, a very important topic on internal controls on where whistleblower comes in picture in the companies, what the internal audit aspects we have to cover and what we have to see, what we have to report is a very important topic which will be taken up by C. Shobit Vivedi, and we have very wonderful moderators who have taken out time for this session. I can see C. Chitu Ramrakhiani and C. Manisha Kamra, who have joined today, taking out time from the busy schedule. Friends, once again, I request all of you, if you have suggestions of any topic, and if you want to share your thoughts, your views, this is a platform to share your knowledge. Please come forward and give your names, and take up this opportunity to share your experience to everyone. You can become the moderators also. Again, we are doing various certificate courses. One such certificate course which is already running on internal audit as well as on bank concurrent audit, which is on online mode, and we are having at various places on offline mode also. So you can participate and enroll over there also. Again, we are having various programs at various branch levels and regional levels. You can participate there also. And of course, webinars are already there every Wednesday, 5 to 11. Stay in touch, stay connected. I am an entire team for doing this wonderful work and the knowledge by our members with this works of you to gain the knowledge. And I'm sure this will be a very wonderful session and you will gain a value at the end session. Thank you very much and over to CHE to Ram Rakhe.
Thank you, Preeti Madam. Thank you so much for such a wonderful opening remarks. And first of all, a great initiative by Board of Internal Audit by bringing great wide experience speakers. Uh, like today, we have with us CS Shobit Dwivedi ji. I will just formally introduce the speaker. Shobit Dwivedi ji holds the position of sector head and vice president in the risk and audit function of the Adani Group. He serves as the chief audit executive of Adani Energy, T&D, media, petrochemical, oil and gas, and aviation businesses. He has over 18 years of experience in governance, risk, and compliance domain. Demonstrated history of working in Big Fours and across multiple industries, including utility industry, infrastructure, real estate, manufacturing, e-commerce, retail, and BFSI. Strong accounting professional background with CA, CISA, ACAMS, CFA, CIA, NSC, NCFM, MCOM, and ECC credentials. Demonstrates high standards of professionalism and leads team to produce top quality results through setting stretch goals and giving support. Combine strong commercial focus with technical and analytical skills to recognize opportunities to add value and make persuasive recommendation for changes. Direct efforts to achieve multiple projects on time within assigned budgets and strong track record of building stakeholder trust and team motivation. Core competencies are his risk management and governance with added focus on environmental and sustainability aspects, investigation and WBA mechanism, internal auditing, anti-bribery and corruption framework, experience of working in multicultural environment with extensive exposure to broad level interactions, current knowledge of industry and regulation changes and professional standards, staff training, development, managing relationship at all level. Furthermore, he also contributes to the field of auditing as a member of the Ethical Standards Board of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and has previously served on the Internal Audit Standard Board. He is also involved in the training committee of the Delhi chapter of Institute of Internal Audits. With this, I welcome Shobit Dwivedi ji. Sir, session is all yours. Thank you so much for your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you so much, Jitu ji, for the kind introduction. And I'm really thankful to the Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting for inviting me and allowing me to share some of my perspectives on the topic of the key elements of whistleblowing management. Okay. And my bad, I have given this long profile of mine. It is for the employers. Probably I should truncate this when I am circulating it for such sessions. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll share the presentation for today. Just bear with me. Is the slides visible?
Yes, sir, visible.
So, okay, today's topic is role of internal auditor, and it's about outlining the whistleblower mechanism. Okay, this is a very pertinent topic, and I've been managing the whistleblowing mechanism for past 8 to 10 years, and whatever experiences I have gone through, probably I'll share it with the team. The approach what we have adopted may not be the optimal one, but we are also kind of evolving along with the time. And in case if anyone wants to sort of share their perspective, you can stop me and ask those clarifications or questions. Or otherwise, we have a question and answer session towards the end of this presentation. Okay. As part of this presentation, we would like to cover the fraud diamond, the regulatory requirements, and where does the role of the internal auditors can be carved out when it comes to whistleblowing management. How do we administer the whistleblowing mechanism, and what are the finer nuances involved when it comes to administering the whistleblowing mechanism? What are the kind of best practices we have? Apart from that, what kind of external support we require, to have the wherewithal to kind of manage the whistleblowing administration? There are few slides on that. Um, there is a section on interview techniques and kind of susceptible areas, but that will take long, and that is why I'm not going to cover these two aspects as part of this conversation. Maybe we may schedule another session because these are pretty detailed aspects when it comes to whistleblowing management. So if you look at this particular slide and look at the definition of occupational fraud, there are three things which comes out very clearly. One, uh, the people involved are misutilizing their occupation or the position or what they are having in the organization for their personal interest, and this is all very deliberate. So in year 1943, 78 years back, this concept of white collar crime was introduced by Mr. Sutherland. And now, white collar crime, if we talk about, these are not the people who are downtrodden in the society or who are under the actual pressure kind of thing. These are the people who are, at the top layer of the strata. Okay, they are having all the required resources at their disposal, and even after they are deliberately abusing the power. Okay? So this shows that human race is there on the face of the earth, the frauds will continue to happen. Okay? Because this is one of the basic instinct the individuals would have. But as a society, we need to enhance our ethical standards and the moral standards. The sense of morality and substance of ethics are never static, so they are still evolving. And all of this needs to be extended to the corporations and the related ecosystem. So, be it our supply chain or related vendors, all of them needs to imbibe the highest of the standards when it comes to ethics and morality. Only then we will be able to curb the menace of frauds. Now, if you look at the couple of clouds, what we have shown over here, approximately 1.13 million financial fraud cases have been reported in India. That's the kind of number. The RBI has also published the number. If you look at, there is an uptick of 166%. Though, if you look at this number, the number of cases have gone high, but the quantum has reduced. So that means the internal controls have improved. The percentage of identifying these frauds have gone up. So that is a positive, story. Apart from that, globally, if you ask, close to about 0.5 trillion worth of frauds have been reported last year. There are only 19 countries in the world who have GDP of more than 1 trillion. So you can imagine that the quantum of this, frauds, if the resources would have been deployed more judiciously or constructively, this would have fetched much more better results. Right? Now, there is the concept of fraud triangle, okay? And this was, devised by a gentleman called David Cressy, and that was again, during 1950s. but still this particular triangle or the concept of this fraud triangle is so potent that it makes a lot of sense to have a look at it before we dive into the topic. Okay. So the triangle has three elements: pressure, rationalization, and opportunity. So if you look at pressure, this could be internal pressure, this could be external pressure, this could be social pressure, this could be financial pressure. Mostly in in case of about 80% instances, it is the financial pressure. But we have seen the trend that it is not only the financial pressure. Say someone is going through some sort of medical treatment, etc., or someone has taken debt, and that kind of financial pressure is there, and that is why someone is inclined towards having carrying out the frauds, right? But now there is a new phenomenon which is called social or the behavioral pressure. For example, a student or someone who is from IIT has joined the organization, and his colleagues or friends have joined companies overseas. Now, after 10 years, he is feeling that he is somewhat trailing in life because the kind of money what his friends are making, he's not able to make in India. And that is why, to match up the same lifestyle, he may be carrying out certain fraud schemes, right? So this is a typical case of social pressure. There could be possibility that certain senior management employees are part of a fraud scheme, and they are pressurizing this individual to be forming part of this whole scheme. Otherwise, he'll be ostracized. So that is an example of internal pressure. Okay, but again, the important aspect is this is all perceived pressure. Okay, we sometimes feel that there is a pressure, and that is why we try to incline towards the fraud schemes. The second thing is the opportunity. Okay, these are the kind of vulnerabilities available out there in the uh, in the company, which the fraudsters would try to circumvent. Okay, now we need to pivot controls around these vulnerabilities, and that is how we will, uh, sort of arrest these vulnerabilities. The third aspect which is required to complete the fraud triangle is rationalization. Rationalization is again perceived. Opportunity is again perceived. So rationalization is people would have some or the other rationale to justify their act. So for example, one rationalization would be a company is doing extremely well, they have made a lot of profits, but they are not partaking those profits with the employees. What if someone takes 1% or 2% of those profits, right? They have also made good efforts, and they are equally uh, you know equally responsible for the kind of growth the organization has registered, right? So that's the kind of rationalization. Now, there is another dimension which has been introduced lately. There are two more gentlemen, uh, David T. Wolf and Dana Harmaner, who have come up with this additional dimension of capability. And that is how this concept has evolved to fraud diamond. So maybe there is a pressure, there is opportunity available. People are in a position to rationalize, right? Uh, they have had this mindset of rationalizing things, but do they have the right capabilities or not? That is an important aspect. So unless they have the capabilities, or they are positioned in such a way in the organization they can actually exploit the opportunity. So it is where the perceived opportunity turns into reality. Okay. So all of these four elements, if it is there, then there is a fair possibility that frauds may happen in the organization. So, being an internal auditor, being the beacon of the governance, it is the responsibility, fiduciary responsibility of the internal auditors to look at these aspects, and they may suggest certain recommendations to the management so that the overall control environment of the organizations can be made robust. Okay. Now, if you look at the few of the cases, right, which have been reported, Enron, WorldCom, Global Crossing, Tyco, all of these cases were example, in fact, including Satya, all of these instances were the examples of management fraud. That means the senior management was involved. They were making there was involvement of the senior management. They were misstating the financials, and eventually they have all gone into insolvency. Okay. Infosys, if you talk about, this was a case of employee fraud. Today's session is more tilting towards the employee fraud, because management fraud is at a very high level, and 90% of the whistleblowing cases which we come across are not 90%, rather I would say 97, 98%. Most of the whistleblowing cases what we get are either against the employees or the external vendors. Okay. Financial frauds are very few and far, but their impact is very high. Now, if you look at this particular slide, it talks about what are the regulatory requirements. So, be it SEBI or the Companies Act, they have provided specific requirement to formulate a vigil mechanism within the organization if they are falling under the specific class of companies. Okay. SEBI LODR is applicable for listed companies, and Companies Act provide certain criteria. Then Reserve Bank of India has also provided guidelines to instill the whistleblower policy and mechanism for BFSI industry. NSE and BSE listing agreements. So if a company is listing its securities on NSE and BSE, then that listing agreement would also have that clause. CARO 2020 also talks about the requirement for the auditors to take cognizance of whistleblower complaints. Now, this is something which we need to pay attention. Earlier, if you look at the CARO requirement, it talks about the confirmed frauds, not even the suspected frauds. But now, to come up with their audit procedures, the statutory auditors are supposed to look at the whistleblower complaints, wherein all the complaints are coming in, and as people say, there will not be any smoke without fire. That is the kind of thought process with which the auditors are looking at these aspects. Now, look at the repercussions. If the CARO has details of these whistleblowing complaints, okay, and it is out there in the public domain, SEBI may take cognizance of it, and they can, suo motu take up certain, inquiries. The shareholders can also ask for certain clarifications and so on. So that is the kind of transparency which is now sorted by different regulations. There is Prevention of Corruption Act, which is primarily applicable to public sector entities, and it talks about the whistleblower protection. So this is an important thing, and it is transient in nature. It is also applicable for public listed companies or private companies which are falling under the criteria. Then there is SFIO, Special Fraud Investigation Office. SEBI and SFIO are quasi-judicial authorities, and they can initiate investigations suo motu if they feel that it is jeopardizing the interest of some of the stakeholders. Okay, so this is the overall landscape, regulatory landscape for having the requirement of vigil mechanism. So these are the ICAI standards and guidelines. If you talk about the first two guidelines, these are more from the standpoint of statutory auditors. SA 240 talks about the auditor's responsibility related to fraud in an audit of financial statements. So they have to emphasize what are the susceptible areas. They need to look at the control environment. Then they need to look at the kind of whistleblowing complaints which have come into picture, and that is how they will come up with their audit procedures. Okay. Then SA 315 talks about assessing the risk which may lead to material misstatements. SA 250 talks about the consideration of laws and regulations in an audit of financial statements. Now, for a multinational organization, we have to also look at what are the other global regulations which are applicable, because that may have impact on the organization's ongoing principle. Then it comes to section 143.12, which talks about what kind of frauds are supposedly to be reported to the central government. There is a financial limit which had been proposed there. Any fraud value which is more than 1 CR by the employees of the organization, employees or directors of the organization, needs to be reported to the central government. Then it also emphasizes the role of the auditors in the suspected frauds, and which comes to the whistleblowing mechanism, right? Likewise, there are standards which have been issued for the internal auditors. Consideration of fraud in an internal audit. Again, we need to look at the control environment. We need to look at what kind of controls which have been put in place. There are certain aspects, like if the organization is a promoter-driven organization and which has experienced steep growth, then probably the way the organization has grown with the same speed, the standard operating procedures or the baseline documents or the reference points would not have been evolved. And that is why there are chances of fraud being done for the organization. Likewise, if you look at the startups, okay, the startups do not have the wherewithal to have the kind of controls required to avoid the pitfall of frauds, right? So additional measures and guardrails are required for these kind of specific entities. SIA 13 talks about enterprise risk management. Fraud risk assessment needs to be done. Whenever we are coming up with our risk for matrices, we should have consideration for risk assessment, for fraud risk assessment. What are the vulnerabilities and whether these controls can be circumvented? We need to mitigate those vulnerabilities, or we need to reinforce certain controls. Okay. Then comes the ethical standards code of ethics from the ICAI, which talks about whatever conduct we have. We should exercise professional care, competence, and diligence, which is expected from the internal auditors in carrying out their internal audits. Right, so it talks about that integrity and objectivity and professional competence aspect of the profession. Now, if you look at this particular slide, the question arises. This is the first question: what is the role of the internal auditors when it comes to fraud prevention and identification and carrying out the investigation, administering the whistleblowing mechanism? So nowhere it is mentioned that the responsibility lies with the internal audit department. Okay? It is only that we need to exercise due professional care. Those kind of aspects are there. Then we are working in a fiduciary capacity. reporting it to the board, then again, we need to be cognizant of things. We need to design our audit programs and procedures in such a way that it should be in a position to identify red flags and surface, you know, frauds. But it is not the primary responsibility of the internal auditors to identify fraud and to address those scenarios. Okay, it is the responsibility of the people who are charged with the governance, and it is who are charged with governance would be the audit committee or the board of directors. Essentially, the board of directors, because they are having the fiduciary capacity and they are responsible for all the stakeholders. And audit committee is a subcommittee of board of directors, and otherwise also we have seen in the previous slide under section 177 and Companies Act also states that the oversight of whistleblowing mechanism needs to be there with the audit. Now, it is the prerogative of the audit committee chair or the audit committee or the board of directors to nominate someone within the management teams to assess them in administering the whistleblowing mechanism. Now, this could be a compliance or ethics officer, it could be internal audit department, it could be human resources, it could be in-house counsel or the legal department, or it could be a specialized fraud risk management setup. So in year 2015, I have been interested to set up the whistleblowing mechanism for my previous organization. In fact, it was into existence, but then we were, trying to revamp that or revalidate that. So I have reached out to a few companies to kind of understand what is the industry trend. So since I was working with a utility company, I have picked up 4 companies from the same industry. So it was Reliance Power, it was Tata, it was GE, and then I have taken one public sector company, NTPC. So in Reliance and Tata, it was pretty clear that the responsibility of assisting the audit committee when it comes to whistleblowing administration was with the internal audit department. GE, it was slightly different. It was the in-house counsel who was taking care of it. And there were certain stewards at each location who were assisting the legal counsel to carry out the investigations, and in case if they find certain leads or tip-offs, they will pass it on to the in-house counsel. But then the in-house counsel of different regions were reporting back to the global internal audit head. So again, it was with the internal audit team. NTPC was a altogether different species because they have general manager vigilance, who was the whole and soul of the vigilance department. Very empowered person because they were getting a lot of tip-offs and information from Enforcement Directorate, CBI, and so on. And then there was a chief vigilance officer who was an IS officer, and it was not his mainstay. It was an additional charge which was being given to him. So largely, we have seen that in most of the cases, the responsibility of assisting the audit committee with whistleblowing administration is with the internal audit department, and it is essentially because the internal audit departments have this vantage point to understand different functions, and by virtue of their nature of work. So internal auditors, like similar to what we do in investigations, gather a lot of facts and figures, look at things objectively, and deduce conclusions out of it. So the nature of work is also very similar. Another thing is we have access to a lot of information. So it is very easier for the internal auditors to understand and different nuances of the business. But having said that, it is not that always the internal audit departments are assisting the audit committees and the board of directors. In my recent experience, in one of the company which we have acquired, the audit committee chair was of the opinion that it should be managed by the compliance manager. And in that case, compliance manager was none other than the company secretary. So it is very important that we should always engage the board of directors and get this mandate out very clearly. Let us not assume things. So let us not, in fact, in this particular case which I have cited, where I was assuming that the internal audit department would assess the board of directors and the audit committee for conducting the investigations. In other group company, where I was of the opinion that I did not receive any specific mandate, and I am carrying out the investigations only because the management is considering us as SMEs. But then we have been reprimanded by the audit committee that though it is not explicitly mentioned, but it is implied that internal auditors will assess the audit committee. So these kind of confusions may create. This will lead to misinformation, and it is very important that internal auditors will go out and get this clear from the audit committee and the board of directors. Now, these are the best practices for whistleblower mechanism. We need to maintain independence and objectivity. I think this is one of the reason why the internal auditors are the preferred function to assess the board for carrying out the administration of whistleblowing mechanism, because we do have independence. We functionally report back to the audit committees or to the senior management. And by the nature of our work, we carry out a lot of objectivity when it comes to execution of work. We also keep a lot of confidentiality. Right? It is very important that policies and procedures needs to be laid out very clear, because these baseline policies and procedures will bring in a lot of clarity. And when at times, as the name suggests, forensics, okay, or there may be possibility that we have to go to the court of law, and then all of these antecedents and policies and procedures will definitely help us establish that we have taken adequate care. Now, there is a lot of difference between while there are a lot of similarities, the kind of work the internal auditors are carrying out when it comes to investigations, but there are quite a few dissimilarities as well. For example, in case of investigations, the internal controls are not the mainstay of our investigations. We look at the allegations and specific transactions, we create our hypothesis, we try to prove that hypothesis, or we try to debunk that hypothesis. As we go along, we recalibrate our hypothesis, right? So that is the kind of approach what we have. And typically the internal auditors may not have that understanding in place, and that is why it is very important that we should continue to have trainings and awareness sessions within our teams. It is also very important that we conduct prompt and fair investigations. So at times, a lot of empowerment comes to the internal auditors because they are carrying out these investigations, etc. But we should always keep that in mind, that this is a role what we are playing, and we should not go overboard. And whatever procedures we are taking, we are giving fair chance to the persons of interest, or whosoever is the subject of the investigations. Okay, regular reporting and monitoring is extremely important. So this is the most important thing. Whatever we do, in terms of our investigations, etc., unless we have promptly reported the findings or reported the kind of support we require, or reported the progress what we have made on different investigations, the entire thing would work very suboptimally. So we need to engage the board of directors, we need to engage senior management, we need to engage various people involved when it comes to monitoring the whistleblowing mechanism. Okay. Now, what is the role of the internal auditors? Okay. One is the oversight and monitoring. So we continue to carry out regular reviews. We conduct a lot of risk assessment. So whenever we are preparing our audit programs, or we call it risk control matrices, we need to look at the fraud risk aspect also. Against the business activities, what are the existing controls we have? Are there any possibility that these controls can be circumvented from the fraud standpoint? And what are the mitigation measures we have? So that we need to look at. So every time we are evaluating a control, we should have an additional lens of fraud risk, so that we are making the system more deterrent, in a way that either the frauds cannot be perpetrated, or if they are perpetrated, then these can be identified early on in the process itself. And whatever potential loss we are expecting can be arrested. Reporting and communication, so confidential reports and regular updates, we are supposed to provide it to the audit committee, to the management, because we at times we need to work alongside the management. There are instances where joint investigations will be carried out, and all of that mandate is coming from the board of directors. So it is not that the internal auditors will do everything by themselves. We need to have adequate resources. We need to have support from the management to carry out the investigations. Now, another aspect is to maintain the confidentiality. Okay. How do we safeguard the information? How do we safeguard the identity of the whistleblower? How do we safeguard the identity of the person of interest? So those mechanisms needs to be there. How are we sharing the information, among different stakeholders? Then, of course, we need to carry out independent investigations. Evidence collection and collaboration is very important, as the name suggests, forensic. There is a fair possibility that this may go to court of law, and whatever evidences we have covered, there has to be adequate documentation trail. We should be able to establish that what kind of steps have we taken, and it should hold waters when it comes to the court of law. The next important thing is internal controls and improvement. So this is what makes the internal auditors the preferred partner or the team or the audit committee to carry out the investigations or to assist in administering the whistleblowing mechanism. As a as a byproduct of the investigations, though I have mentioned that it has never been the mainstay of the investigations to recommend and look at the internal controls, but the audit committee and the board of directors are very keen to understand and very keen to have adequate internal controls. Okay, so that these are not a repeat issue. The vulnerabilities have been plugged in, and it is not a static or structural issue when it comes to the control fabric of the organization. So it is also very important for the internal auditors to look at the control assessment and aspects around that, how these standard operating procedures have been updated, what kind of changes are required in the policy, existing policies, or if there are certain policies which are critical, quintessential, but are not available within the organization, then all of those policies needs to be framed. But now policy development is not the responsibility of the internal auditors, but certain inputs when it comes to control mechanism, etc., can be provided by the internal auditors. So we should not go overboard also on that. Yeah. So as I have mentioned that it is very important for the internal auditors to get a clear mandate. Okay? Let us not assume that we are going to assess the audit committee or the senior management when it comes to investigations. It is not expected from us unless the clear mandate has come from the board of directors or the audit committee. And if all of that is to be enveloped in one such document, that would be audit charter. Okay. We might have heard about this audit charter, but over the period, this has garnered a lot of attention. And I think this is a time when all of us should go back to the drawing board and look at our existing audit charter and get that approved by the board of directors and audit committee. The audit charter would have, talk about what kind of authority the internal audit department has. It will talk about the different kind of specific duties. For example, investigation, bespoke advisory work. It could also talk about the kind of consulting work we can do, what kind of access rights we have. Okay. Now, for this access rights and all, we need to have certain policies supporting this aspect. For example, the employee code of conduct. So, employee code of conduct would have a certain section which will talk about if there is any ensuing investigation, then the person or the employee is duty bound to assist the uh, audit committee, assist the internal auditors in conducting the investigations. They should cooperate. Okay? They should maintain the confidentiality, etc. Okay? Then standards and ethics, professional standards are there. Like there have been certain guidance which have been issued by IAA. There are guidelines which have been issued by ICAI. And if we are forming part of those industrial bodies, then we should definitely abide by these standards and ethics. Then there has to be review and approval every year of the audit charter. It's not a static document; it is evolving, and sometimes it requires some sort of recalibration, revalidation, and the change management needs to be properly reviewed by the internal audit department. Coordination with other functions. This is also very important, as I have mentioned that it is not that internal auditors will do everything by themselves. Okay. Certain investigations which require subject matter expertise. There could be instances where we need to lean on the experience of senior management. All of that we require a lot of collaboration, and this needs to be a concerted efforts. So this is all about the internal audit charter. So there are two aspects we have covered. One, we have to get a specific mandate if we have to administer or assist in administrating the whistleblowing mechanism. And for that clear mandate, we need to look at our internal audit charter. Or the internal audit charter needs to be approved by the board of directors. So these are the two important aspects we have covered so far. The next thing is the WB policy and mechanism. So now the mandate has come to the internal auditors that they need to assess the board and the audit committees in whistleblower mechanism. So there are two more critical reference point. One is the WB policy. WB policy is a high level document, okay, which is usually available to the public in large, to the employees. Okay. And WA policy will talk about what are the different channels through which the whistleblowing can be done. Who is the ombudsman of the organization? It will talk about the protection to the whistleblowers. How do we uphold the protection of the whistleblower? It will talk about certain aspects like whether anonymous complaints are acceptable or not. It will also talk about zero tolerance policy when it comes to fraud. Those kind of specifics will also be mentioned over there. It will talk about different, owners for investigation, etc., but not very in detail. Okay, so these are the key aspects which will be mentioned in the whistleblower policy. Now, as a good practice, the organization should upload this on the website so that it will be accessible to all the wider stakeholders if they would like to blow the whistle. Right? So, all of the accessibility of the whistleblower policy is also very critical for the success of the whistleblowing mechanism. Now, the second part is the WB mechanism. The policy, as I have mentioned, is very high level. Okay, but we require certain additional aspects, and those nuts and bolts will be covered as part of the whistleblowing mechanism. So, whistleblowing mechanism will talk about how are we going to address a particular investigation, how are we going to collate the information, who all parties will be involved in the investigation, how the reporting would happen, what are the internal protocols, what are the different categories within which the investigation owners will be assigned, and so on and so forth. But this is a restricted document. Okay, the senior management and the people who are concerned would have access to this whistleblower mechanism. And as the audit charter and the whistleblower policy, this whistleblower mechanism needs to be approved by the board of directors or the audit committee. This is again, the requirement we should lay out very clearly, because that will bring a lot of clarity. And tomorrow it should not be the case that people will start questioning that why we have taken a particular approach when it comes to conducting the investigation. So it will bring a lot of uniformity, it will bring a lot of consistency, it will bring concerted efforts and validation from a wider stakeholders. Okay. Now, what are the things which are included in the whistleblower mechanism we talk about? The first thing is the whistleblowing committee. Okay. So, see, now we have seen that in many organizations, the internal auditors have been interested to carry out this function of whistleblowing administration. But there are, certain, pitfalls. Okay. Internal auditors are perceived as, having cognitive bias. For example, if we are doing procurement review, and last time when we have conducted the audit, the procurement head of procurement has not given us adequate time. He has given us very skimpy responses. The audit was not being done in a very conducive manner. We might have cognitive bias. We might have prejudices, and that is what taint the profession, and also does not give a lot of confidence to the function as a whole. So it is very important that we should also have uh, some sort of springboard, okay, or a sounding board, wherein we can lean on whenever we require some sort of expert opinion. We need some kind of guidance, or we require some sort of collective wisdom. And that is when we should always strive to have whistleblowing committee. Now, usually the whistleblowing committee comprises of senior level people. Uh, it may have legal counsel, okay, in-house counsel, because at times the investigations may go to court of law. Someone has to testify in the court of law and all, and also the legal counsel can help us understand when we need to onboard the external counsel, because that is where the attorney-client privilege will come into picture. Okay, so it is very important that we look at the composition of the whistleblowing committee very carefully. So one is the in-house counsel, the other one is the CFO. So as I have mentioned that now the statutory auditors or SEBI or the stock exchange are very keen, and they are looking at the progress of investigations, etc., very keenly, and uh, the the CFO is kind of coordinating with different agencies. It is important that he should also be forming part of the whistleblowing committee. The third would be the human resources, head of the department, because there are quite a few behavioral aspects. At the end of the day, we are dealing with human beings. So he may also be forming part of the whistleblowing committee. Usually, in large conglomerates, these are the three people who will invariably be part of the whistleblowing complaint. Usually, people get confused with the role of the whistleblowing committee. Sometimes people are of the opinion that whistleblowing committee will, be carrying out the investigations. No, I mean that is not the purpose of, constituting the whistleblowing committee. Whistleblowing committee will give overall guidance, okay, and the collective wisdom. These are the people who are having a lot on their plate. They are extremely busy people. We are looking at the wisdom and not the utmost expertise. For example, if we would like to onboard SME, an SME for the investigation, the to get the mandate from the whistleblowing committee will be very easy. Or for example, if we require certain budgetary help, then if there is a whistleblowing committee, it will be easier for us to get the mandate, because once we get the buy-in from the top leadership, then it will be easier to navigate through the system. Okay, the other thing is, in case if there are conflict of interest instances, usually we used to follow two up and no line function conflict. So, for example, if the complaint is against someone who reports to the CFO or to the human resources, then he has to recuse from the proceedings of the whistleblowing committee. Okay. Then, of course, the members needs to be perceived, and in spirit needs to be independent. Okay, so this is about the whistleblowing committee and role and structure. So this is important when it comes to laying down the whistleblowing mechanism. This is again very indicative. Okay, we may have a different structure, but this is one of the ways. We have IA team, governance, BUHR, all of that forming part of the auditors committee. And as I've mentioned that we may have in-house counsel, we may also have company secretary as part of the whistleblowing committee, because they are the one who are dealing with the board of directors or audit committee on a day-to-day basis, that licensing work, and to uphold the concept of whistleblower protection and all. They'll be able to give that comfort to the audit committee and the board of directors. So they may also be forming part of it. Then we may have SMEs. Okay, for example, if there is a particular case wherein some sort of assistance is required in terms of understanding certain HSC aspects. Okay, then we may have those SMEs, subject matter experts, forming part of the investigations, or they may have representation to the whistleblowing committee. Okay. Then we may provide updates to the managing director and all, but again, before we kind of release the reports and share the information with the manager director, it is very important for the internal auditor that this entire mechanism has been approved by the audit committee. Otherwise, we have come across a number of instances where a lot of miscommunication would happen. This is again an indicative model which we are talking about, the whistleblowing mechanism, receipt of whistleblowing cases, investigation, reporting, and follow-up. So it is also very important that we bifurcate the whistleblowing cases into level 1 cases and level 2 cases. I mean, it's not about level 1 and level 2. It's about we should have certain classification. We need to prioritize the cases. Not everything requires the attention of the senior management and board of directors. At least not instantaneously. Okay. So, for example, the level 1 cases that we talk about, okay, we need to involve the whistleblowing committee even before we take up the investigations. Or there may be possibility that within 72 hours of receiving the level 1 cases, we have to notify the audit committee. Level 2 cases are not having that severity level, and these are the kind of cases where the internal audit department or whosoever is assisting may take up the investigations and then notify the whistleblowing committee later point of time about what were the outcomes. But it is very important that before we conclude everything, we are taking the whistleblowing committee into confidence. Okay. Now, these are the WB, cases and their priority metrics. Again, this is very indicative. I mean, it depends. It's not one size fit all kind of thing, and it depends on the organization. This is how we have perceived our things. Different organizations may come up with their own priority metrics. For example, here, if you look at financial loss of more than 50 lakhs, why not 1 CR, why not 2 CR? I mean, again, it's a very subjective thing. Then, if there is any fatality or serious physical injury is involved in that particular instance, reputational damage is there, which involves the regulatory non-compliances of major nature, then which involves the senior management, because senior management would have the management override instances, right? They'll take exceptions and all. So it is very important that we consider them as level 1 cases and any form of retaliatory conduct. Because as we have mentioned that we have to uphold the protection of whistleblower. If there are any retaliatory kind of conduct and there is a whistleblowing on that, then it needs to be considered as level 1. Okay. Now, why have we considered 50 lakhs? See, as per section 143(12), there is a requirement for the statutory auditors to notify the central government if the amount of the fraud involved is more than 1 CR. Okay. So we have taken a more conservative view and keep it 50 lakhs. Okay, because while conducting the preliminary assessment, we might not be in a position to look at the exact quantum of the exposure what we have, and that is why we need to take a more conservative viewpoint. Now, this will have the escalation metrics. The level 1 cases would be directly reported to the audit committee, to the managing director, to the whistleblowing committee, and we need to take their inputs, in terms of how do we proceed with the investigations and what should be the ideal way. There could be possibility that there are a lot of sensitivities involved, and we require some sort of external help. Okay. All other cases which are falling under the category of level 2 will be conducted by the investigation will be conducted by the auditors straight away, and then the investigation findings can be shared with the whistleblowing committee for their inputs. And that is how we can manage, but need not require to provide the details to the audit committee instantaneously. Having said that, on a periodic basis, we need to update the audit committee on all the cases, because there is another requirement which states that we need to give direct access to the we need to give direct access to the whistleblower to the chairman of audit committee. Okay. Now this is again a very peculiar thing. While there is a requirement from the regulation that we need to give a free access, but it also creates a lot of nuisance at times. It opens the floodgate, and the audit committee and the chairman of the audit committee is also very cynical about this whole regulation. And number of complaints would come, and most of them, would be false positives. That could be a scenario. So it is important that we discern. We have this mechanism. It is not that we are not reporting the cases to the audit committee, but then we are leaving it to the audit committee and the chairman of the audit committee to decide upon whether this particular case worth to have direct access to the audit committee chairman. It is the prerogative of the chairman of the audit committee that we should leave it to him for to decide upon all of that. Yeah, so this we have already seen. Another important aspect is the categorization matrix. Okay. Over the period, we will get different types of frauds, and we need to categorize them. Unless we categorize them, we will not be able to understand what are the susceptible areas, where are all the genesis of most of the whistleblowing cases, and that will be really helpful for us to understand the trends and the kind of mitigation controls required. So for designing those controls, it is very important that we categorize the whistleblowing cases into different categories. Like for example, we may have category A, which talks about bribery and fraudulent accounting. Category B about asset theft. Category C would have conflict of interest. So conflict of interest is required more of a behavioral mitigation measures. Okay, a more softer aspects where we need to build our ethical culture in a robust way. Right? Category D is about retaliatory action and HSC securities, where we will talk about wearable gadgets or the PPEs or the infrastructure required, okay, in terms of making it more robust. Then again, each of these categories would have subcategories. Like for example, bribery, if you look at, it talks about what all comprises of the bribery. Okay. Items of value includes money, gifts, gratitudes, which are given to the government officials, etc. All that will fall under bribery. Then what in all comprises of financial fraudulent accounting, etc. Category A. So likewise, we need to come up with different categories, and this all needs to be done with consultation with the different stakeholders. Okay? Because we might not have access to all the information, and we may not be in a position to comprehend things properly, and that is why sometimes we have to go out and take assistance from different process owners, okay, or the business teams. Now, once we have categorized the different types of whistleblowing complaints, we should also look at the investigation owners. As I have mentioned, that it is not that all the investigations will be carried out by the internal audit department. There could be possibility that we might still have an oversight on the administration of the whistleblowing mechanism, but the investigation owners would be different. For example, look at conflict of interest. Okay, conflict of interest, if it is not related to any kind of corruption, okay, then it is more tilting towards the behavior aspect of things, wherein we need to involve the HR department, or HR may spearhead the investigations. Likewise, if we look at the retaliatory actions, again this will be HR, human resources. Why did this happen? And certain whistleblowing cases related to HSC and all, we need to lean on different experts. So far we have seen the whistleblowing policy, whistleblowing charter, the IA charter, which will give a specific mandate to the internal auditors. We have seen whistleblowing policy, which is a public document, okay, which talks about the different channels and who is the ombudsman and different policy structure and all. Like for example, anonymous complaints. Do we need to consider anonymous complaints or not? This is a typical question which arises. Okay, so we have seen different organizations are treating this differently. There are organizations even with very limited information, they will conduct some sort of assessment, and it will be registered. There are organizations who have taken a stance that unless there is actionable information, we will not be carrying out the investigations. Okay, it depends. But and in the whistleblowing policy, we should categorically mention that we deprecate the anonymous complaints. So I'm using the word called deprecate, which means we acknowledge, but we discourage anonymous complaints. Okay, or at least the anonymous complaints should have actionable and reasonable information, so that adequate investigation can be carried out. It is also the responsibility of the internal auditors to try to reach out to the anonymous whistleblower from whatever ways they have received the whistleblowing complaints. For example, if it has come through emails, right back to the whistleblower, because sometimes it is very important to have a communication line with the whistleblower, so that we can have follow through and collate additional information. Okay, so whether we encourage, discourage anonymous complaints, and what would be the form and template through which the complaints can be raised, all of that will be forming part of the whistleblowing policy itself. Okay, so these are the different. So after that, we have seen the whistleblowing mechanism, which talks about uh, whistleblowing committee, which talks about we need to categorize the different complaints in terms of their severity. Then we should categorize them based on the attributes, okay, because that will give you larger themes, that bribery is an issue with the company, or the physical safeguard of the asset is an issue, or the culture of the organization is not good, and that is why there are a lot of issues around conflict of interest or retaliation against the whistleblower and so on, or the health, safety, and environmental aspects are not taken care of. So unless we have these different subcategories and categories, we will not be able to address the thematic issues. Okay, and then comes the investigation owners. as we have mentioned that it is not the internal audit which will do everything by themselves. We have to reach out to other stakeholders as well. And all of that needs to be forming part of our whistleblowing mechanism, which is a restricted document, but nonetheless, it has to be approved by the audit committee. Now, this is about the handling of anonymous complaints, receipt of anonymous complaints. If there are no credible information, it is only the aspersions which are being raised. For example, someone is saying that the CEO is corrupt or he is kind of favoring certain people, and that's all. Then probably this is not an actionable information, and we should not take up the investigations at all. I mean, but in case if we are getting repetitive, such complaints, probably there might have been underlying some other underlying issue. Okay? Like for example, we have experienced that whenever there is a new project coming, that means whenever we are opening up the tendering process, there will be sudden surge in the number of complaints we are receiving. Okay? So we need to understand, is that the issue with our transparency when it comes to tendering process? Is that the issue with the debriefing? Is that the issue the way we have structured our RFPs and so on? Okay, so this is very important that we look at the content of the content of our anonymous complaints. Now, one important aspect is the preliminary assessment. Okay. Yeah, this is where we have another section of preliminary assessment, so I'll take it up over there. So in terms of anonymous complaints, as I mentioned that we should try to reach out to the whistleblower. Usually we write 3 reminders, even if we do not have credible information, so that the anonymous whistleblower may come back with actionable information. Okay. We have also seen another trend that if the employees or the stakeholders have good comfort around the whistleblowing mechanism, or they trust the whistleblowing mechanism, then the number of anonymous complaints will go down. There are fair chances that the anonymous complaints will eventually come up openly and share additional information. You will be able to establish communication channels with them. In 30% and 40% of the cases, rather, people who were anonymous the earlier stages at later point of time when they have raised the complaints, they have done it under the named complaints. They have given their credentials. There are third type of complaints. One is named complaints where they will share their credentials. There are anonymous complaints and there are pseudonymous complaints also, wherein under the pretext of some credentials, the whistleblower will raise the issue. Okay. So we should also be cognizant of that fact, that how are we receiving and what is the source of these anonymous complaints, and is that worth exploring and going deeper into the issue. So this is the snapshot of close to about 135 cases, whistleblowing cases, which we have handled in past 8 years. The number may be slightly less. The organizations are getting even more number of complaints. 10% of the cases we have done the investigation suo moto. We have noted certain red flags, but again, we need to be very watchful. In case if we find certain red flags, it is extremely important for the organization to reach out to the audit committee and get a mandate that we are now initiating the full-fledged investigation. Are they okay with it? Okay. Do not assume to go overboard and go beyond what is mentioned in the audit charter. Okay. Because at times the investigations would have overarching impact, would cut the boundaries, right? We need some external help and so on. And 90% of the cases, as mentioned over here, have come through the whistleblower. Most of them were false positives. Around 60% of them were false positive. One reason is the nuisance value. If anybody wants to make havoc in the system, they will raise whistleblowing complaints. For example, if let's take the example of insider trading. Okay, anybody can raise the complaint and mark a copy to SEBI. SEBI is anyways very spooky about these complaints. They will recommend the management to have external consultant carry out these investigations, and then these investigations will go for a very longer time. Everything will get jeopardized. So uh, there are instances of false positives, and we should have the mechanism to discern false positive early on. Okay? The preliminary assessment which we are carrying out should be in a position which would discern the false positives, and we should be able to avoid the nuisance which is intended by some of the miscreants by raising these false positives. Again, 15% of the cases we have found them inconclusive because there are certain externalities involved. The complaints were not very comprehensible. We were not able to interpret them properly, and inadequate information was there. Then we have found 70% instances where we have taken actions like warning letters or memos have been uh, raised, but it did not lead to termination. Okay. And the fourth one is where we have gone for full-fledged termination. So it is also nowadays important for the management to understand that they should not try to settle things within the organization. Okay, because sometimes for meager amount of money, nobody wants to take so much of nuisance because it is taking everybody's time. But we should exemplify the kind of consequence management what the organization is proposing, because that will lead some sort of deterrence within the organization. Okay. Then again, if you look at the dispersion among what kind of different fraud categories or different areas of functions in which we have noted the frauds or the whistleblowing complaints, I would say, these are primarily from procurement. Then human resources were also major contributor, and followed by conflict of interest. Okay, and this conflict of interest was also majorly falling in the category of procurement and human resources. So wherever there's an interface between the entity with the external world, the propensity of fraud for those areas would be slightly higher, and that is how we should take all of that into cognizance when we are uh, planning our internal audits or the audit activities. Now, if you look at the dispersion between malfeasance and misfeasance, malfeasance means the deliberate negligence. Okay? This was a deliberate attempt to defraud the organization. Uh, that was about 60%, and if you look at the misfeasance, it was 14%. Misfeasance is about not the deliberate thing. It is just that the people were people have not paid attention to their professional due diligence part. It was a negligence on the part of the individuals, and that also entails some sort of consequence management. Now, moving on to the preliminary assessment. This is again one of the important aspects which the internal auditors are very well positioned to take it up. Okay. See, as I mentioned that the false positives or the complaints what we get are having a lot of repercussion. Okay. How are we going to maintain the confidentiality of that individual? Suppose if there are complaints against an individual, then obviously we need to carry on the investigation. We have to call upon certain inquiries, and how so much we try to keep things under the wrap, people will get some sort of inkling, right? And that would jeopardize the reputation of the individual. So it is very important that before we carry out a full-fledged investigation, we have adequate information through the preliminary assessment. We should be able to discern whether it is worth taking the deep dive into the allegations or not. And this is all being done very we can keep things which as an auditor I have faced. Whenever we go and ask for certain information, suppose say we would like to evaluate the purchase acquisitions, purchase orders, or note for approval, exception approvals, and everything is sort of digitized. And we have reached out to the finance department. Finance department would be very inquisitive. Okay, they'll be asking hundreds of questions to us, like why are we asking this information now? So it is very important that we keep on spreading the awareness that we may have these kind of special assignments, okay, and we may be for this kind of information, and it is expected from the employee code of conduct that they are supposed to provide the information without asking too much details on what is the context, so that we can keep up the confidentiality aspect of it. Second thing is the internal auditors need to be in a position to access information uh, through different systems and different channels. The good part is most of the organizations are going through a transformation journey of digitization. Data is available in digital form, and it is easier for us to slice and dice the data, to analyze it, to pull out the trends. It is also important that we need to push our thinking to anticipate as wide a range of things as possible, because uh, there are quite a few things which we need to piece together to form some kind of hypothesis when it comes to investigation. Um, yeah. Then again, there is a possibility that some of the complaints are very operational in nature. For example, a customer has raised a complaint, and that he was trying to reach out to the customer care. Customer care has not responded in a timely manner. This is very operational. In certain instances, the since the conflict of interest aspect is not there, there's no fraud angle to it. Uh, while since this has been reported through the whistleblowing channel, the internal auditors may have an oversight how this particular thing has been disposed of, but they may let the functional teams to carry out the investigation on a particular complaints, on these kind of complaints which are more operational in nature. Okay, there could also be aspects regarding the behavioral aspects, wherein the HR would be in a much better position than the internal auditors to carry out the investigations, and that is how we have to involve them in the preliminary assessment itself. Okay. Okay. Information investigation confidentiality. We have already spoken about this to a large extent, that we should have confidentiality agreements with our suppliers and with our vendors. There has to be clear communication when it comes to employee code of conduct, vendor code of conduct. Okay. We need to have centralized case management. This is very important. Nowadays, the large organizations have implemented tools like Entella, which will talk about the entire life cycle of an investigation, and the information needs to be available only need to know basis. Okay, it is a privileged and confidential information. It is not for everyone to look into the investigation related data. Whenever we are conducting interviews, etc., we need to look at secure locations so that we can keep up the confidentiality part. Then we need to schedule it at times which are not the normal working hours, just again for the purpose of the confidentiality part. But then we need to look at the convenience of the whistleblower, etc. Also, it should not be onerous on the whistleblower to come to the location and at an odd hours, which is sort of bringing in some kind of uh, uh, discomfort to the whistleblower. Then the anonymous reporting, secure communication tools. That is another way. As we have mentioned that we may have external, uh, hotline. That is another aspect. Okay, that is why many organizations nowadays are outsourcing the hotline to external firms. But again, we need to weigh the pros and cons. While there is NDA signed and other confidential agreements signed with the external firms, at times it is very difficult to kind of maintain the confidentiality, and that is why many organizations are more comfortable having the hotline within the organization. So again, we need to look at the pros and cons and what kind of resources are available within the organization. Okay. Then we need to protect the whistleblower identity. Whenever we are writing our reports, okay, we should not mention the name of the whistleblower. We can give pseudo names, etc., so that the information is not revealed. We should also use words very judiciously, like person of interest instead of calling it alleged, because these semantics makes a lot of difference. Okay. Also, when it comes to investigation, we need to look at whether the data is encrypted or not. For example, if we are sharing some information, whether we have encrypted the data. We used to send a report in one email, and in the subsequent email after a time, like we used to share the password. So there are ways and means through which we can protect the data. When do we involve the external investigators and legal counsel? That is again very important. As I mentioned that some of the cases are extremely complex, and we need to take care of the client attorney-client privilege. And if you would like to insulate ourselves, then we have to get the external legal counsel early on in the investigation. Uh, we also need to have external expertise when it comes to market intelligence or data analytics or digital forensics. All of that requires external help. So we need to have master service level agreements so that we can adequately speed and scale when it comes to the investigation process. In case there are any breaches, then we need to take immediate action so that we can arrest whatever damages have been made, and then we should have disciplinary actions also being taken for people who have leaked the information. We should also have regular training sessions to keep up the confidentiality and awareness programs among the team members. Okay. See, Now, the good part is most of the companies have a very good amount of digital footprint. The data is in the digital form. In fact, the supportings of purchase order, purchase acquisition, proposals, contracts, everything is available online. And through process mapping, etc., it is easier to get the documentation trail. Okay. It is also very important that how the information has been flown between different parties. That trail also needs to be taken into consideration. For example, when did we release the draft report? When was the final report released? So on. So this is about the external vendors in consulting. We require investigation services from forensic accounting, digital forensic, interview and surveillance. So it depends on the complexity of the case and the quantum of work what the internal auditors have. At times, we are extremely mired with our uh, routine activities, and it is not possible for the company to focus on the investigations, but investigations are all time bound. So we might have to lean on the expertise and help of the external firms. Digital forensics and all, sometimes it does not make sense to have all the tools and technologies within the group because it is expensive, and second, we will not have all the optimal tools at our disposal. So for that purposes, we need to take help from the external firm. Another important aspect is the risk assessment. Okay, this is more from the preventive, uh, risk assessment standpoint or fraud risk management. We need to get external help with their broader horizon and understanding of the leading practices. They'll be they'll be in a better position to evaluate the controls for the organization. Another aspect is on the communication and public relation. Now, uh, there is some investigation which is in progress or some fraud which has been established that may have negative impact on the reputation of the organization, and how do we collaborate with the communication department or the external consultants to mitigate those risks, reputational risks. Legal and compliance advisory, we have already spoken. One, an organization have multi operations uh, working operating from different geographies. It is very important that they should have understanding of different regulations and rule of the law applicable for that organization. For that, they can take some legal consultation. It is also important for us to come up with policy development, especially for code of conduct, etc. Uh, Whistleblower hotline and reporting channels, we have already spoken that whether these hotline needs to be maintained externally or internally. So all of that we can evaluate if there is external help required. Okay, this we have already spoken, so I'll not spend much time on that. These are the susceptible areas: procurement and supply chain, corporate governance, financial misconduct, and so on and so forth. But having said that, it is not one size fit all kind of thing. Uh, the internal auditor needs to carry out the risk assessment properly, look at the control environment. For example, as I mentioned that if organization has recently taken over a few assets, then of course it will become a melting pot. The processes are not mature. We are operating in geographies which are much lower in the fraud perception index, right? So all of those cases we need to be slightly more cautious. Uh, Instances of business exigencies or evaluating the reward and recognition criteria. De-scoping is another area which is very susceptible. Then exceptional mechanism. There are organization for smooth running. They will have some sort of exceptional mechanism but at times it becomes norm. So all that needs to be taken care of very carefully by the auditors. These are the preventive fraud mechanism. We need to have a very clear tone at the top, and we should emphasize on this particular aspect. Whether the code of conduct has been laid down very clearly or not. Proper segregation of duties needs to be there. Okay. If segregation of duties are there, the percentage or the chances of frauds come down significantly. On the lower side. The reason being, then connivance is required, and connivance is not very uh, often seen. But if the connivance is there, then to decode that or to decipher that is also equally difficult. There needs to be delegation of authority, and delegation of authority have other two dimensions about, we call it RESCI metrics, information and consulting. So wider group consultation would be there. Then what kind of, we may have physical controls. We might have seen social engineering nowadays. Okay, this is a new type of fraud. People may come inside the premises by piggybacking and all, and then they may implant viruses, etc., and then ransomware would come into picture. So these kind of new types of frauds are happening where the internal employees have some role to play. We need to be cognizant of that fact also. Then conducting internal audits, external audits, and surprise audits, that needs to be done regularly. But all of these external independent audits need to have an additional lens of uh, fraud risk management, standard operating procedures, ethics training. So again, this is very important that we also look at the culture of the organization. So culture is about the policies, practices, management philosophy, operating style, which characterizes the culture of the organization and which manifest into the behavior of its employees. So we need to assess the culture. There are ways and means through which the culture audits can be conducted, and I think this is a new trend because if you look at your audit reports, okay, usually the internal auditors would write inadequate control monitoring, okay, or usually write like laxity on the part of the management, and that manifests. If you look at the underlying issues, there are larger issues of cultural, discrepancies. Okay? So all of that needs to be emphasized in our regular audits. Yeah, so this is digital forensics, data retrieval analysis. These are the specialized kind of services where we will degaussing of hard disk, etc. Okay, where we can retrieve the data which is otherwise lost. There has to be centralized repository of cases where we can carry out data analytics and all. Pattern recognition and predictive analysis, which will give us early warning signs that certain red flags have been identified, and the sumoto initiatives can be taken up in terms of conducting investigations and all. Secure communication channels are extremely important so that we can keep up the confidential part, which we have already. These are the physical controls, what we are talking about, CCTV, physical surveillance. Now, for how long we need to keep the records for our CCTV and all, that needs to be deliberated. Whether it is for 15 days, 28 days, it depends on cost benefit analysis and all, but that has to be a conscious call, right? Certain areas which are susceptible for fraud, say theft for physical assets and all, there we need greater amount of physical surveillance. Tamper-proof records, blockchain technology and all. I mean, there are organizations which are using these technologies for the sanctity of the transactions. This is about the interview technique, so I am not going to take up this. This is again a very elaborative topic in itself, which requires another session. Yeah. So that's all about it. These are the few of the considerations the internal auditors may uh, take into cognizance. With this, I will request the moderators to look at the kind of clarifications which have come to the participants so that we can have uh, more interaction with the participants. Yeah. Any questions, any clarifications from anyone where I could share some additional perspective?
Hello. Thank you so much, CA Shobit Dwivedi, sir. It is a wonderful session. There are four questions from the participants. May I comment?
Yeah, please.
Ji, sir. First question is, how do you deal with the WB information pertaining to KMP or board level functionaries? Is it sufficient for internal audit to pass on such information to audit committee?
So I think that's a very pertinent question, and we have faced this kind of challenges in the past. So, see, it is very important that the protocols for communication, the whistleblowing updates with the board needs to be laid out very clearly. For example, in my previous organization and in my current organizations also, we have laid down this procedure to have a private session with the audit committee. So, if you look at the proceedings of the normal audit committee or the usual audit committee, there are quite a few agenda items. There will be presentation from statutory auditors. There will be presentation from finance function. There is a presentation on internal audit. In that, if someone asks about the updates on whistleblowing, it is very difficult for us to hold back the confidentiality part. Okay? Because say if the audit committee member is asking, can you please give the details in that conversation? You can't say no, and you can't speak up about the case also. So these protocols needs to be laid down very clearly. Number two is wherever the KMP is party to this party to the investigation, okay, they have to recuse from whatever sessions we have in the audit room. Okay. Third thing is before the audit committee, etc., we should notify this to the chair of the audit committee that we have received a complaint about so and so person, which is forming part of the KMP, and take their guidance. One thing is very clear that they have to write whomsoever is there against whom this complaint is there and he's forming part of the KMP, he has to recuse from the proceedings. Okay, but the important thing is that we need to engage the audit committee chair and the audit committee beforehand if there are cases against the KMPs. That is very important. Let's not assume things by ourselves. And this practice of having a private session uh, for whistleblowing updates is also very useful. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you. One more question is there. Given the high KMP you are occupying in Adani Group, could you please clear the air about allegation by an external agency about deliberate manipulation of Adani share prices, mainly to fund shares indirectly and retain control over group entities beyond legally permissible limit?
See, I'm not the spokesperson of Adani, so I recuse myself commenting on that. This session I am taking more from a professional standpoint and not as a spokesperson of Adani. So I'll not be taking up this question.
Okay, sir. One more question is there. Hi, thanks for the presentation. Can you share your PPT with the student,
Yeah, of course. I mean,
with the members?
I'll share this presentation afterwards.
Okay. And one more question is there. The weakness noted in WB investigation cases should be included as control improvement and should be included as a part of detailed audit review in coming audit plan.
Absolutely. I mean, this is very important. As I've mentioned that the board of directors and audit committees are very keen to have these internal control enhancement opportunities as part of the investigation reports. And sometimes it loses its relevance. Suppose the consequence management has been taken up, but nobody has paid attention to the internal control opportunities which have been identified, then there is no use of putting it across in the report. So carve out those internal control opportunities as part of our usual audit follow-ups, and some of the aspects can further be evaluated during our regular reviews. So definitely we should take a follow-up.
Okay, sir. That's all. The questions are over. It is a time for vote of thanks. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this seminar on the role of internal auditor, outlining the whistleblower mechanism, I extend our heartfelt thanks to the speaker, CA Shobit Dwivedi. Thank you for your enlightening presentation. Your insights on the role of internal auditors and the importance of strong whistleblower mechanism have been invaluable for us. Thanks to the organizing committee, the support team, Arun Agarwal sir, tax support team, chairman, vice chairman, and the board of internal audit and management accounting of ICAI for ensuring the seminar success. To our attendees, your active participation and insightful questions have greatly enriched the session. Thank you all once again. Have a safe journey to home and a wonderful day. Thank you so much, sir. It is a very enlightful session.
It is all my
Thank you.
pleasure. And again, thanks to the committee for allowing me to share my perspective. Thank you so much.